Towards the end of our parasha, after the Torah gives us the details of the communal sacrifices, the Tamid and the Musaf, then the Torah says that Moshe conveyed all of this information to the Jewish people, which seems fairly obvious. Surely that's what he always does. So Rashi says it's lahafsiko inyan, and he quotes Rabbi Shmuel to teach us that we don't know exactly where Hashem's words end and Moshe's words begin. Now, what exactly is Rashi saying? The Ramban says that you may have been confused as to exactly which segment of the conversation, this week's parasha or next, is attributed to Moshe. But Rashi doesn't sound like he's saying that. It almost sounds as if he's saying, you might have thought that Moshe did not convey certain information to the Jewish people. Now, why would you think that? What's interesting about it is that this story about the Yomim Tovim and the various korbanos associated, as well as other laws associated with Yom Tov, was already said in Parashas Emor. And there also we had a summary at the end. Rashi didn't feel the need to comment then, so how come here? And we'll look at the comparison between the two parashas, and we'll learn that actually the Torah is telling us different information then as to what it's telling us now. We're also going to see that Rabbi Yishmael is a key personality, and that's why Rashi quotes his name, because he holds differently to Rabbi Akiva about how exactly Torah was conveyed from Moshe Rabbeinu to the Jewish people. And we're going to see, generally speaking, that there are two perspectives on what elements of Yom Tov were taught at which point in time. It's a question of what's relevant at a particular point, which raises an issue for us. Are korbanos relevant to us today? What could we learn from them? At the end of our parasha, after it goes through all of these communal korbanos, that Moshe said to the Jewish people everything that Hashem had told him to say. And that's the big question. Why does the Torah have to tell us that Moshe conveyed the information to the Jewish people? Is that something you have to tell us? You have to tell me that Moshe fulfilled what Hashem had instructed him to do, which is tell the Jewish people and instruct them to bring these korbanos. Throughout the Torah, there are so many places. The instruction from Hashem to Moshe, and nothing in the Torah to say, and Moshe conveyed it as well. So why here? And the reason why the Torah doesn't have to say it in other places is self-evident. It's pretty obvious that if Hashem told Moshe something with the intent that Moshe should tell it to the Jewish people, Moshe b'vadai osakain. Obviously Moshe did it. It's so obvious that Rashi never feels the need to tell us that Moshe did it. So why here? So why here in this parasha did the Torah have to tell us that, guess what? Moshe actually gave the instruction over to the Jewish people. Comes along Rashi and explains, that it's there, lahafsiko inyan, to make a break between two different conversations. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael, immediately Rashi attributes this to the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Why do we need to make a distinction? Have a look. When we're told the whole parasha of the korbanos, it's very clear that it's Hashem speaking. Whereas the beginning of next parasha, where Moshe addresses the Rosh HaMatos, the heads of the Shvatim, there it says Vaydaber Moshe. So it's Moshe's words. We needed to make a distinction. So the Torah has to tell us, we see Hashem's words, then we see Moshe's words. You may have the impression that Moshe's words start with the story of Nedarim, and he did not repeat the information of the Korbanos. Therefore, the Torah had to repeat itself and say, and Moshe conveyed that information too. Because if not for this added verse in the Torah, we would have thought that Moshe's conversation with the Jewish people started in next week's parasha about the halachas of Nedarim. Now, even that, in spite of the fact that Rashi has explained it, still doesn't make sense. Okay, so maybe the psukim indicate that way, but let's be frank. Before you came across this, did it ever enter your mind that Moshe did not convey the information to the Jewish people, just because it didn't say so explicitly in the Torah? Let's say that this line was absent, and it did not say Moshe conveyed the information to the Jewish people, then yes, the literal indication of the psukim would have been because the language of the psukim only in the next parasha starts to tell us about Moshe speaking to the Jewish people. It would have implied the words of the psukim may have indicated that perhaps Moshe did not convey this information to the Jewish people. Still, even though the psukim don't seem to lend themselves to this message, how would it ever enter your mind that Moshe would ignore a direct instruction from Hashem, Tzav es b'nei Yisrael, tell the Yidden? Why would you think he didn't? So let's take a look at the Ramban. He has a different, maybe softer way to explain it. It's a beautiful explanation. However, we're going to show that it doesn't fit with Rashi. So when the Ramban analyzes Rabbi Shmuel's opinion, the same opinion that Rashi quoted, that it's lahafsiko inyan, to make a break between Parshas HaKorbanos and Parshas Nedarim, says the Ramban, so Ramban says something a little different. Sometimes we have the construction of psukim where a phrase could be aligned to what precedes it or to what follows it, and we need clarity. So the Ramban says that's what's happening over here. Because what do we have? We have the pasuk that says, the pasuk is HaKosav, Vaydaber Moshe Rosh HaMatos Gomer. The pasuk at the beginning of next week's parasha says, and Moshe spoke to the heads of the Shvatim. So now, that pasuk, Hayim le'achrov ledine parshas Matos, says the Ramban, and Moshe spoke to the heads of the Shvatim. Spoke what? The words that are going to follow, the halachas of Nedarim, or lefon of ledine parshas Seinu, or is it telling us kind of a summary that Moshe told the Jewish people what we have already learned at the end of Parshas Pinchas, Parshas HaKorbanos. So because it's a little unclear if we just relied on that pasuk alone, says the Ramban, that's why our Parsha Pinchas added an extra pasuk, and Moshe told the Jewish people all the halachas of the Korbanos Tzibur as Hashem had instructed him. So that gives us a clean break. Okay, we know that was already discussed. And now when we start the next Parsha, and Moshe starts to address the Shvatim, we now know this is a new speech concerning new halachas, Nedarim, because he's already told them the halachas of Korbanos. And the truth is, the Ramban says, Rashi himself uses exactly this logic actually in Parshas Matos. So the Ramban firstly says there are many places that the various Midrashic commentators make exactly this point, that we have a certain ambiguity, and so the Torah will add extra information to clarify that ambiguity. Says the Ramban, guess what? Rashi actually grappled with exactly this issue in a pasuk in Parshas Matos. What's the pasuk? The pasuk says, after the Yidden went and they fought a war against Midian, which they were meant to do, after the horrible story of the Midianim, or the Midianois, seducing Jewish men, so they kept a whole lot of the women alive, and Moshe was upset about it, and he said, this is not the way you're supposed to behave. So then he tells them the instruction. Now the instruction could sound a little ambiguous. What does it say? Here, good, you have to kill all the men. And then in the next pasuk it says all the children you have to keep alive, and somewhere in between it talks about the women. So now we don't know, are the women part of the instruction to be killed, like the men, or the instruction to be saved, like the children? Says Rashi, Asher Sibas Kefil Tevas Haroigu Hi Lafsiko Inyan. That's why in that pasuk the Torah repeats the word to kill them a second time to make this clear. Pirish Kamenas Lealter. Shenemole Nichtav Hirgu B'Shenis Lachar V'Chol Isha Gomer Lo. You know what I mean? V'Chol Isha Gomer Shach L'Suga Kaden Hirgu Kol Zachar. Or L'Suga Melach Reize V'Chol Hatav Gomer Achayu Lochem. So Rashi immediately clarifies why we needed this word haroigu, because if you don't have the word haroigu, then you have a question in your mind. Are the women under the banner of hirgu, like the men, to be killed? Or are they under the banner of hachayu, like the children, to be saved? We don't know. So the Torah lahafsiko inyan made it absolutely clear for us. It tells us again the word Haroigu. Says the Ramban, that's exactly what's happening over here. We wouldn't know. When it says, Vaidaber Moshe Rosh HaMatos, in the beginning of next week's parasha, is he speaking new information, what we're going to read in next week's parasha? Or is that the Torah telling us that he repeated what's in this week's parasha? To clarify that, says the Ramban, the Torah repeated the words, Vayomer Moshe, then Moshe told all of the halachas of karbanos to the Yidden. Brilliant according to the Ramban, but it's not going to fit with Rashi's Pirush. Why not? You cannot plug that into Rashi's commentary here. Why? Because look what Rashi does over here. He uses language that is intentionally different to the language used in the Sifri. The Sifri says, I have this ambiguity. I don't know what the pasuk's talking about. Rashi doesn't say those words. Because of Beferish, instead Rashi says something that seems to be very clearly otherwise. What does he say? Rashi says, if not for this repetition, the mistake we would have made is Rashi doesn't say the mistake we would have made is a misinterpretation of the next pasuk Vaidaber Moshe in Parshas Matos. He doesn't say that. Eloi says, Rashi says the mistake we would have made is we would have thought that Moshe did not tell them the halachas of Karbanos Tzibur at all. So that's interesting. Why does Rashi believe that we would have imagined Moshe not to tell them the halacha at all? And that's why we need the pasuk to clarify and say, oh no, Vayomer Moshe, he did tell them. Now, what makes this even more curious is that we have a very similar conversation in Parshas Emor after we're told all about Yom Tov over there, including the Karbanos. And there also it says that Moshe kind of recapped. Rashi doesn't say a word. So we need to also understand, as the Ramban himself argues, after Parshas Emor, b'sei Parshas HaMoyados ksiv, at the end of describing all the Yomim Tovim in Parshas Emor, there we've got a similar pasuk. And Moshe said all of the details of the Yomim Tovim to the Jewish people. We actually find that Chazal give all kinds of reasons why we need that pasuk there at all. Rashi doesn't say a word. Rashi feels that it makes absolute sense. Why is it so clear to Rashi there that the Torah had to repeat itself and tell us that Moshe conveyed the information? Yet here, Rashi is, we need a reason. We need to explain to you why the Torah says that Moshe had to repeat the information. Ve'inu moving. It doesn't really make sense at all. If there is a logical, simplistic reason why we need to know in the Torah that Moshe repeats the information, then Hayal Rashi then Rashi should have dealt with it the first time it arose. That's how Rashi operates. The first time a question arises, the first time there's a necessity to explain something, Rashi explains it. So if there's a necessity to explain according to Pshat why the Torah says that Moshe actually conveyed information, Rashi should have dealt with it the first time it came up in Parshas Emor. He doesn't. Not only that, let's look how Rashi explains it here. He says, here Rashi says that up until this point, you would think it's only Hashem speaking and Moshe not repeating. And that explanation could never have fit into Parshas Emor at all. Because unlike in our scenario, where here we know that it's Hashem's words, and then in next Parsha Matos it's going to be Moshe's words, you don't have that in Emor. The next thing after Parshas HaMoyados is Hashem speaking again. So this whole notion that you would have thought maybe it's Moshe's words doesn't exist in Emor. Okay, so we need to understand why the question is here and not in Parshas Emor. There's actually a very simple reason why it's a bigger issue for us here whether or not Moshe conveyed the information than it is in Parshas Emor, and it has everything to do with timing, with the chronology. When did these conversations happen? And what's relevant right there and then. Maybe in Parshas Emor, some of the information was not yet relevant to the Jewish people because they were not yet in Israel, so you could be excused for imagining that Moshe doesn't tell it to them at that point. Whereas here, this is on the eve of crossing into the land of Israel. Everything has to be told to them now. So, Parshas HaMoyados, Asher Parshas Emor, Nemer B'Smichus Lakomas HaMishkan. The time frame is that Parshas Emor is shortly after or around the time of putting up the Mishkan. Before the Yidden were counted, as we saw in the beginning of Parshas Bamidbar. Now, among the things that they were told at that point includes a whole string of mitzvahs that would not be relevant to the Yidden at this time. It would only be relevant once they came into Eretz Yisrael. The Dugma, Oimer, Chodosh, Tehalechem. Right, these are various mitzvahs that are agricultural mitzvahs, and you can only fulfill them when you have an agricultural society, which they didn't have in the desert, so these mitzvahs were not yet relevant. Now, the minute you look at mitzvahs that are not relevant immediately, you can imagine, okay, so why tell people this information if they're not going to act on it for X amount of time? So therefore, in Parshas Emor, it's pretty obvious why the Torah has to tell us that Moshe conveyed this information, because we in our logical minds would have said, look, we know that Moshe is going to tell everything to everybody. And of course, we expect that Moshe would always convey the information to the Yidden ASAP. As soon as he gets the download from Hashem, he shares it with them. As Rashi already told us, that at the time of Matan Torah, we see that Moshe goes straight off Har Sinai directly to the people. Why? Why is that necessary information? To show us. As soon as he gets information from Hashem, he conveys it to the Yidden. But your logic would say, yes, that's generally the case, but in this specific scenario, it's possible that Moshe waited. So Moshe could have, we would imagine, could have postponed it and said, look, there are all kinds of other issues that I have to deal with. Moshe Rabbeinu at this time is fielding questions from the Jewish people, if not every question, because he's already set up a hierarchy. Certainly the more difficult questions, he says he's going to answer himself. Also, he's got so many other halachas that he has to teach them that are relevant to their daily lives right there and then in the Midbar. So we would have thought, logically, I could understand if the Torah doesn't spell it out, perhaps Moshe doesn't tell them these halachas that are only going to be relevant in Eretz Yisrael. Especially if you look at it from this angle, which Rashi actually quotes, that it seems to be that Parashas HaMoyados was told after the parasha of how the Jewish people are supposed to encamp in the desert. If you put it into context, there were many other immediately relevant conversations that Moshe had to have with the Jewish people. You could logically expect that Moshe would delay telling them the mitzvahs that are only going to be relevant in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, in Parashas Emor, obviously the Torah had to tell us, no, it's not like you think. You think in your mind that if you were running the show, you might have postponed giving information that is not immediately relevant until later. Not Moshe. The Torah wants you to know that Moshe conveys all information to the Yidden as soon as he gets the opportunity. That the Torah wants us to know that immediately Moshe gave all of the information to the Yidden. And in fact, that would actually clarify for us that obviously if Moshe immediately gave that information to the Yidden, it's obviously because that's what Hashem wanted him to do. So we get it clearly why in Parshas Emor we had to know that Moshe was immediately going to transfer that information to the Yidden. But in our parasha, there's no logical reason why Moshe should delay. So if Hashem tells him to tell the Yidden, and there's no logical reason to delay, we expect that Moshe tells the Yidden immediately. Considering this is the end of Moshe's leadership, if he doesn't do it now, when is he going to do it? That's why here Rashi raises the question. In Emor, he understands that according to Pshat, you appreciate why the Torah says, you know what? Moshe told them the information right now, even though there were so many other things on the agenda, and this information was only relevant later. But in our parasha, there is no logical reason why Moshe would delay. So why does the Torah have to tell me something that I already know? That's why Rashi has to say it's to clarify for us, to make things very clear. What begins where, what ends where, who said what, and when. Because it's important for us to know that this is Moshe's words, not just the next piece. Now, the only reason that we'll be able to understand why this is even an issue in the first place and why you would think maybe that Moshe didn't say it, well, that's going to have to do with the fact that it's Rabbi Yishmael speaking. There's a running debate between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva how Torah was conveyed. Rabbi Akiva is of the view that all of the information, top to bottom, was all given at Har Sinai, repeated again at the Oyel Moed, and repeated again at this point in history by Arvos Moav, just before the Yidden went into Eretz Yisrael. Whereas, according to Rabbi Yishmael, only the headlines were given at Har Sinai, and the detailed information was passed on to the Yidden later. Now, those two perspectives have a very strong impact on how we're going to read this story. Now we understand why Rashi had to tell us who he's quoting. Usually Rashi doesn't tell us the source unless knowing the source is going to help us better understand what he's saying. So now that we know it's Rabbi Yishmael, what does Rabbi Yishmael say that helps us understand this piece? The fact that in Parashas Emor it had to tell us that Moshe told the information to the Jewish people. What did we say the reason is? Because otherwise you would have thought this is not immediately relevant. Maybe Moshe delayed conveying it to the people. And once we know that it's obvious in Parashas Emor why the Torah had to tell us that he conveyed it, that raised the question in Pinchas, why over here did you have to say it? This whole thinking matim rak l'das Rabbi Yishmael. This whole thinking only works according to Rabbi Yishmael's view. Rabbi Yishmael's view is that only the headlines of every mitzvah were given at Har Sinai, and the details later at Oyel Moed. So because Rabbi Yishmael already thinks along the lines that Torah does not all get presented at once, therefore, it's logical to say that Moshe himself might not present all of Torah at once. He may have delayed certain information. But according to his his colleague with a different view, Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva, everything was given at once at Har Sinai, all of the information, all of the details, then repeated again at Oyel Moed, and then repeated again at Arvos Moav Nimtza. So according to Rabbi Akiva, things were taught even when they were not immediately relevant. Because look, the information was taught then, and it was taught again. So one of the stages, it wasn't immediately relevant. So therefore, from Rabbi Akiva's perspective, there isn't actually a logical reason to imagine that Moshe would postpone giving the information. If there's no logical reason to imagine he's postponing giving the information, then we don't have the big question about why is Emor different to Pinchas. From Rabbi Akiva's perspective, there is no question here. Rabbi Akiva is of the view that this is how the pasuk works. Sometimes the Torah will give us the story as it is, Moshe hearing it from Hashem. Sometimes the Torah will tell us the information as Moshe conveyed it to the Yidden. And sometimes will tell us both. It's no question about our parasha that it says, and Moshe told the Yidden. That's how it is. Because as far as Rabbi Akiva is concerned, it's the same information being repeated on 3 different occasions, and so therefore the Torah selects sometimes to word it one way and sometimes to word it another way. The entire question is only a question according to Rabbi Yishmael, and Rashi wants us to know that. ואין להקשיס, מדוע אפשר לא מתיר את זה שהפסוק נכתב לא כדי לשלול תועס בתוכן הפרשה רק מצד דרך הכוסף וכו', אף לפי Rabbi Yishmael. You'll say, no, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva has a really good point. Why are you so convinced that the fact that it tells us over here that Moshe repeated the information to the Jewish people means exactly that he repeated information? Why didn't you also say like Rabbi Akiva? Sometimes the pasuk speaks this way, and sometimes the pasuk speaks that way. Because the truth is that it's exactly this that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael are arguing about. Meaning, if you go with the approach of Rabbi Akiva, that all information was given at Har Sinai, and then all information was given again at Oyel Moed, and then all information was given again at Arvos Moav, then Rabbi Akiva's view is that all information is repeated 3 times. So Rabbi Akiva says, if all information is repeated 3 times, the Torah is not going to repeat it 3 times. Doesn't have to. Doesn't even have to repeat it twice necessarily. And so if Rabbi Akiva is of the view that sometimes the Torah tells us all of the information in one location and sometimes in a different location, by the same token, sometimes the Torah tells us that Moshe conveyed the information to the Yidden, and sometimes it doesn't tell us, and that's okay. And it doesn't in any way undermine the possibility that Moshe did it. So as far as Rabbi Akiva is concerned, the whole question is a non-starter. The idea that you're picking out the fact that, oh, look, the Torah says that Moshe gave this information to the Jewish people. Yeah, that's okay. Sometimes the Torah will tell us that. It's okay. It doesn't mean that in other places it should have done the same. Whereas, what's the reason that Rabbi Yishmael is absolutely convinced that only the core product was given at Har Sinai and the details emerged later? Because this is critical information about Rabbi Yishmael's view. Rabbi Yishmael takes the Torah at face value. If this is where something is written, that's where it was said. That's the time frame, that's the context, and it's specific. And unless you have some very compelling reason why this should not be. Therefore, as far as Rabbi Yishmael is concerned, if this is where something is written, this is when it was taught. Not like Rabbi Akiva says, no, it was taught before and it will be taught again after, but it's told here. Rabbi Yishmael's view is if it is spoken about here, it is because here is where it's relevant. Same thinking Rabbi Yishmael will apply here. Rabbi Yishmael says, if the mitzvah of Korbanos Tzibur is written in Parshas Pinchas, that's because this is the time frame where those mitzvahs were taught. If in this parsha, using the same logic, it says Moshe conveyed the information to the Yidden, it's because in this context it's important for us to know that Moshe conveyed the information to the Yidden, which raises the question, why? So to appreciate better the distinction between Parshas Emor, where we were not confounded by the question, hey, why is the Torah telling us that Moshe conveyed the information? And here we are, is because we got to really look at the difference between what each parasha wants to convey. So, in order to answer that question, why don't we ask a very simplistic question? Why are the mitzvahs of Yom Tov split into 2 parashas, Emor and Pinchas? Aleph, you have Parshas Emor sheba ikar adgash al isur melacha u'mitzvahs kol Yom Tov. If you look at Parshas Emor, the main theme of Yom Tov there is to tell us that you may not do work on Yom Tov. And then in a general sense, it also tells us about the Korbanos. Compared to Parshasenu, Pinchas, sheba adgash ha'ikrisal prote ha'korbanos haboim b'chol yom Shabbos Rosh Chodesh v'Yom Tov, ele gam bo niskir yisam locha b'Yom Tov. In our parsha, the main focus is to tell us the specific korbanos that are unique to each special day. And by the way, it kind of mentions that you're also not allowed to work on those days. So why that distinction? There are 2 possible ways we could explain it. Yesh levara b'shnei ofanim. 2 possible ways. Aleph. One possibility is Parshiyos elu nemru leMoshe kebeis Parshiyos shnonos bizmanim shonim. One possibility is that Hashem gave different mitzvahs to Moshe at different times. In Parshas Emor, which is one time around the Hakamas HaMishkan, then he was told mainly about the halachas of not working on Yom Tov. And our Parsha, Parshas Pinchas, which is quite a bit later, that's where he was told mainly about the Korbanos. Parshas Emor b'Svichas HaKomas HaMishkan, Parshas Emor b'Sefer Arboim Shana. Right? Emor at the time of the Mishkan, Pinchas at the end of 40 years. Don't you think that our parsha, which speaks about the karbonos that they were meant to bring on Yom Tov, should have been discussed right after the Mishkan was put up? Because you assume that they brought these karbonos while they were in the desert, except for those that maybe it says very clearly these only apply when you come into Eretz Yisrael, which is not even on this list. So perhaps we could say the answer there is that what's unique about Pinchas is we're not just talking about the karbonos and of course the kohanim who have to bring the karbonos. Here we're expanding the mitzvah to affect the whole Jewish people, meaning this is hazirus v'hatzivoy. This is the time that Moshe turns to the entire Jewish people and says, you're all responsible to make sure that these karbonos are all brought at the correct times. But the details of all these karbonos were already told to Moshe before, and he had conveyed them to the elite group of people who needed to know about them, Aaron and his family. So the chiddush of this parasha is telling the whole community. So one possibility is we say Emor is where the community was told, where Moshe was told the halachas of the Isur Melacha, and Pinchas is where they were told, or Moshe was told to tell the Yidden the details of karbonos, the Tamid, the Musaf, etc. One possibility. The other possibility, Beis, is that Beis HaParshas Nemri Moshe Yachtov, that both Emor and Pinchas were both told to Moshe Rabbeinu at the same time. V'yadirabba. Parshas HaKarbonos to Parshas Emor, Kodim the Parshas HaMoedos be Parshas Emor. In fact, you may even argue that Parshas Pinchas, where it talks about the Karbonos Tzibur, was actually told before Parshas Emor, which speaks about the restrictions of not working on Yom Tov. Actually, that would explain why we don't have the details of the Karbonos in Parshas Emor, because the Torah is relying on the fact that it's already been told. Are you going to say, well, if that's the case, the Torah is presented not chronologically, well, in spite of the fact that all the information was conveyed then, there has to be some reason that the Torah chose to split them and to move the details of Parshas HaKarbonos all the way to Pinchas. At the end of 40 years, and that would fit with the principle which Rashi has actually taught us a few times, that the Torah is not necessarily always presented chronologically. Okay, so those are the two possibilities. Either Emor was one conversation and Pinchas is another conversation years apart, or they were two simultaneous conversations recorded in two different places in the Torah. Now, Ulafi Oifen Zeh. If we go with this opinion, let's go with the second view, okay? That both pieces of information were conveyed to Moshe at the same time, but were recorded at different times in the Torah. Then you could say that in Parshas Emor, where it says that speak to the Yidden and tell them the special days in the Jewish calendar, there you could say that the Torah wants to make a split. It wants to say there are details that are being conveyed at this point in Parshas Emor that have to be kept distinct from other details that were told at the same time, but the Torah is only going to spell out later in Parshas Pinchas. And that would be along the lines of the theory that we put forward before, which is at that point in history, Moshe was telling all the Yidden the restrictions of Yom Tov, and in Parshas Pinchas would be the first time that he would tell all the Yidden the details of the Karbonos. You could actually see a little nuance over here in the language of how it's used in Emor and how it's used in Pinchas. When you go to Parshas Emor, each time that it speaks about another Yom Tov, it starts the conversation with a fresh Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Leimer. Whereas in our parsha, there's like this general opening statement, tell the Yidden the following things. Why? Because actually, our parsha actually occurred before Parshas Emor, and therefore it has this grand introductory statement. Tzaves b'nei Yisrael. Instruct the people. Instruct them what? All the korbanos, which we only get to tell them about in this parsha, and all the details of each individual Yom Tov, which we already told them in Parshas Emor. And then after the grand introduction, which is only recorded in Parshas Pinchas, in spite of the fact that it was conveyed to Moshe before Parshas HaMoedos in Emor, after that, then Parshas Emor says, okay, here are the things that you have to tell the Jewish people now. And just to make it absolutely clear that here in Parshas Emor is the time to tell them the unique laws of each Yom Tov, to make it absolutely clear, the Torah keeps saying, tell them this one, tell them that one, Vayidaber, Vayidaber. Now, We've now made a proposal that the Torah is completely not chronological in this regard. Parshas Pinchas, Parshas HaKorbanos, rarely belongs before Parshas HaMoedos and Parshas Emor. Now, anytime you're going to say Ein Mukdam U'Meuchar B'Torah, it's not just for fun. It can't be said loosely. There's got to be a compelling reason. The only time that we're entitled to say, oh, this is not chronological, is if you've got a really powerful reason to do so. As the Rebbe has explained multiple times. So therefore, moving ashal pipshute shomikra parshas hakorbanos to parshas en emra b'seifar boim shana. The only way that we'd say it has to be non-chronological must be because the Pshat shows us a strong proof that this parsha, Pinchas, Parshas HaKorbanos, is all the way at the end of the 40 years. If we don't have a clear proof that this is all the way at the end of the 40 years, then we don't have a reason to say it's Ein Mukdam U'Meuchar. So Rashi makes this point right at the beginning of the Parshas HaKorbanos, where he says, Tzav es b'nei Yisrael. Why does Hashem say, instruct the Yidden? Rashi says, Ma amur l'mayla chulei. What's the immediately preceding paragraph in the Parasha? It doesn't say, why do the two parashas go next to each other? It says, Ma amur, what was said just before this, showing us that this is where it belongs historically. This conversation happened here historically. What was the conversation? Moshe says to Hashem, that you should appoint a successor. Says Hashem to Moshe, before you tell me my responsibilities to the people, why don't you tell the people their responsibilities to me? Tzav es b'nei Yisrael. So therefore, Rashi is showing us that this is not just the particular slot that was allocated to this parasha where it should be written in the Torah, but more than that, this conversation occurred at this point. This instruction to the Yidden occurred at this point. But if it didn't have the Torah adding the line, and Moshe told this information to the Yidden, then we would have said, whoa, this parasha is completely in the wrong place. We'd start thinking, one second, this is information that Moshe was told already long ago at the time of Akamas HaMishkan, as recorded in Parshas Emor, even before Parshas HaMoedos. But for some odd reason it was written here, and we'd think, why? Why would it be written here? And then we'd start thinking, it's written here, but Moshe never got to tell the people. He only told them what is in Parshas Emor, the restrictions of not working on Yom Tov. Now the puzzle comes together. Therefore, the Torah had to repeat over here that Moshe, here, at this moment, spoke these halachas to the Yidden, so we would know clearly that Moshe did actually convey all of this information to the Yidden. And therefore we come to conclude that what? That this parasha was actually said here. So effectively, what's Rashi done for us? in no time. What's Rashi done for us? Is illustrated to us literally in a couple of words that we could have totally misunderstood, not just whether or not Moshe conveyed the information, but we could have totally misunderstood how the chronology of the parasha was supposed to play out, and we could have imagined information was never conveyed and information was written out of chronology. Another nuance in the difference, which will help us to clarify this picture too, difference between Emor and here. At the end of Parshas Emor, it says Vayidaber Moshe, that Moshe told the Yidden all the halachas of Yom Tov, and here it says Vayomer, which is a softer expression. This even has an halachic application. Parashas Emor is talking about how Yom Tov is observed right across the whole of history. Right? That you're not allowed to work, that you have to shake a lulav, all those things. They're right across the whole course of history. There the expression is vayidaber. Vayidaber means something which is always relevant. But in Parshas Pinchas, when you're mainly talking about korbanos, which we cannot bring right now during Golos, the best that we can do right now is we could learn about the korbanos, which is then considered as if we had brought them. There the lashon is vayomer. It's not so strong. It's not so compelling. Plus, when Hashem gives us an instruction that can apply at all times, he uses Vayidaber, which is a harsh expression. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tovea b'toikif mipnei yisrael sheikaymes hamitzvos halolu. The Eibishter has a strong expectation and demand of us that we will keep these mitzvahs lelo yechiluk beinu meduba bisman beis hamikdash bisman hagolos, without any excuses of saying, what time of history is this? Whereas the idea that we're supposed to learn about korbanos in lieu of actually bringing them, so then you can't tell us that that's a chiyuv. It's a good thing to do. It's appropriate. We should do it. But you can't say it's a chiyuv like the chiyuv of keeping Yom Tov. So the word is vayomer, a softer word. In fact, if anything, we say to the Eibishter, don't make that vayedaber, don't make that a tviyah. Because we say, because we say, our davening to Hashem is we say, we don't want to learn about korbanos in lieu of bringing them. We want to bring them. So definitely not vayidaber. Definitely this should not be concrete as a reality. That's why in our parsha it's a softer expression. The Eibishter is asking us softly, almost nicely, please consistently learn about the korbanos, daven for the korbanos. The Eibishter is asking us nicely, gently, please show your interest. Show that you care about these korbanos, learn about these korbanos, and that will expedite the opportunity to actually bring them. As the Rambam says, then Mashiach will come, restore the Beis Hamikdash, bring us back to a state of bringing korbanos. And that should happen mamash immediately.